The cardboard box caved in at the worst possible moment, sending Emma Bellamy's carefully packed groceries tumbling down the rain-slicked steps of her apartment building. Cans rolled into puddles, apples escaped down the sidewalk, and her last jar of expensive coffee shattered on the concrete. Emma stood frozen in dismay, exhaustion from her double shift at the hospital washing over her. It had been that kind of week. "Oh dear, that's quite the disaster," came a gentle voice from behind. Emma turned to find Mr. Harrison, her 82-year-old neighbor from 3B, watching the scene with kind eyes. Despite the rain sprinkling down, he was impeccably dressed in pressed trousers and a sweater vest, leaning slightly on his wooden cane. "Nothing that can't be fixed," Emma said with forced cheerfulness, though tears threatened. The broken coffee jar represented her one small luxury after endless hours as a nurse in the pediatric ward. Mr. Harrison descended the steps carefully. "Let me help you, dear." "No, please, Mr. Harrison. The sidewalk is slippery. I've got this." Emma hurried to collect her scattered groceries. "Nonsense. I may be old, but I'm not helpless," he insisted, already bending to retrieve an escaped orange. Together they salvaged what they could, and Emma walked Mr. Harrison back to his apartment. The place was immaculate but showed signs of a life, well-lived photographs of family, books lining every wall, and the delicious smell of something baking. "Would you like some tea?" "I just made cookies," Mr. Harrison offered. Emma glanced at her watch. "I really should get these groceries put away, but thank you. I understand. Perhaps another time." He looked disappointed, and something in his expression made Emma pause. She realized she had never seen visitors at his door. "Actually, I'd love some tea. Let me just put these in my apartment, and I'll be right back." 20 minutes later, seated at Mr. Harrison's kitchen table with a cup of perfectly brewed Earl Grey and homemade shortbread cookies, Emma found herself relaxing for the first time in days. "So you're a nurse?" Mr. Harrison asked. "Pediatric nurse, yes." "I've been at Memorial Children's Hospital for 6 years now." "A noble profession. You must love children," Emma smiled. "I do. They're resilient in ways adults could learn from." "My grandson says the same thing. He works with children too, in a way," Mr. Harrison said proudly. Though his approach is more about building their future than healing their present. Their conversation flowed easily, and Emma found herself visiting Mr. Harrison regularly over the next few weeks. She learned he had been a history professor before retiring, that his wife Margaret had passed away 5 years ago, and that he had one daughter who lived abroad. "Let me help with your groceries," Emma offered one Thursday afternoon, spotting Mr. Harrison struggling up the building steps with several bags. "I wouldn't want to impose," he protested weakly. "It's no imposition. I'm heading up anyway." She took 2 of his heaviest bags and accompanied him to his apartment. Once inside, she helped unpack the items, mostly prepackaged meals and canned goods. "You know," she said carefully, "I often cook extra. I'd be happy to bring you some homemade food occasionally." "That's very kind, but I insist. It would actually help me. I always make too much." And so began their arrangement. Twice weekly, Emma would bring containers of homemade meals to Mr. Harrison. In return, he shared stories of his travels, recommended books from his extensive library, and became the grandfather figure she'd never had. One evening in late October, Emma arrived with a container of chicken soup, only to find Mr. Harrison looking particularly frail and pale. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, immediately switching to nurse mode. "Just a bit under the weather," he admitted. "Nothing serious." Emma set the soup down and placed a hand on his forehead. "You're running a fever. Have you called your doctor? It's just a cold." "I don't want to bother anyone. Mr. Harrison, please call me George. After all these weeks of feeding me, I think we're past formalities." "George," she amended with a smile, "being sick at your age can become serious quickly. Let me call your doctor." When the doctor recommended a visit to the emergency room as a precaution, Emma didn't hesitate. She packed a small overnight bag for George and drove him to the hospital where she worked. "Is there someone I should call?" she asked as they waited in the ER. "Your daughter." "Or that grandson you mention sometimes. My daughter Claire is in Japan for business. As for Ethan, George hesitated. He's extremely busy. I'd hate to worry him unnecessarily. I'm sure he'd want to know, Emma insisted. George finally relented, giving her Ethan's number. Emma stepped outside to make the call, expecting perhaps a brief, polite conversation with a busy professional who would promise to check in later. Hello, the voice on the other end was deep, concerned. Hi, is this Ethan Harrison? Yes, who's this? My name is Nina Bellamy. I'm your grandfather's neighbor. He's at Memorial Hospital right now. It's likely just a bad case of flu, but given his age, the doctor wanted to monitor him overnight. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Ethan said without hesitation, which entrance. The ER on Pine Street, but you don't have to. Thank you for taking care of him, Nina. I'll see you soon. True to his word, 28 minutes later, Emma looked up to see a tall man with George's same blue eyes scanning the waiting room. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that somehow looked rumpled, as if he'd been working all day. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and the worry lines on his face softened when she approached. Ethan, I'm Nina. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. Where is he? They've admitted him for observation. Room 412. I can take you up. As they rode the elevator, Emma explained the situation. It's really just precautionary. His vitals are good, but pneumonia is a risk at his age. You sound like you know what you're talking about. I work here. Pediatric ward, understanding dawned in his eyes. You're a nurse. For 6 years now, when they reached George's room, the older man's face lit up. Ethan, you didn't need to come. I told Nina not to bother you. Getting a call that you're in the hospital is never a bother, Grandpa. Ethan moved to the bedside, his concern evident. How are you feeling? Like a fuss is being made over nothing. Emma smiled at their interaction. I'll leave you two to catch up. No, please stay, George insisted. I want my two favorite people to meet properly. Ethan turned to Emma, really seeing her for the first time. She was petite with warm brown eyes and chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. There was something inherently calming about her presence. Nina's been bringing me home cooked meals twice a week, George explained. And sharing her limited free time with an old man. She has. Ethan looked at her with new appreciation. Emma shrugged. He listens to my hospital stories and lends me books. It's a fair trade. They talked until a nurse, not Emma, came to inform them that visiting hours were ending. I'll be back tomorrow morning, Ethan promised his grandfather, and I'll stop by after my shift, Emma added. Outside the hospital, Ethan walked Emma to her car. Thank you for looking after him, he said. It means a lot. George is easy to care about. He mentioned you bring him meals. Emma smiled. Nothing fancy, just home cooking. Still, that's incredibly kind. I've been worried about him being alone so much, especially since my mother moved to Tokyo last year. He talks about you constantly, you know. He's very proud. Ethan looked surprised. Really, what does he say? That you work with children in some capacity, that you're building their future, Ethan chuckled. That's a generous interpretation. I run Harrison Educational Technologies. We develop interactive learning platforms for schools. Wait, het. My hospital just received a massive donation of your tablets for our long-term pediatric patients. That was actually Grandpa's idea. He suggested we focus on kids who are hospitalized. Well, they've been transformative. Children who were isolated can now attend virtual classes, connect with friends. Emma trailed off, suddenly registering what he'd said. You run HET, as in you're the CEO? Ethan nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. Co-founder and CEO, yes. Wow. George just said you worked with educational software. He never mentioned you were, well, a workaholic, Ethan suggested with a self-deprecating smile. I was going to say successful, but that works too. They both laughed, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition, a possibility. Would you like to get coffee sometime? Ethan asked. When you're not busy saving lives and feeding my grandfather, Emma smiled. I'd like that. 3 days later, George was discharged with a clean bill of health and strict instructions to rest. Emma continued bringing meals, but now she occasionally found Ethan there as well, having dinner with his grandfather. Their coffee date happened the following Saturday. Ethan picked her up in a modest sedan rather than the luxury car she had half expected. "This isn't what I imagined a CEO would drive," she commented as she buckled her seatbelt. "The other car is being serviced," he replied seriously, then caught her expression and laughed. "I'm kidding. I hate flashy cars. They draw attention for all the wrong reasons." The coffee shop he took her to was a small, independent place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. They settled into a quiet corner with their drinks. "So," Ethan began, "Grandpa tells me you're originally from Oregon." "Portland, yes. I moved here for nursing school and never left." "Family still there?" Emma's expression flickered. "My mom is. We're not close." Ethan nodded, not pushing. "I understand complicated family dynamics." "Your grandfather mentioned your parents divorced when you were young." "When I was 12. Dad moved to California, started a new family. Mom threw herself into her career. Grandpa and Grandma were my constants. Their conversation flowed easily from family to careers to books they loved." Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn to Ethan's intelligence and unexpected humor. "HET wasn't always successful," he admitted when she asked about his company. "We almost went bankrupt twice in the early years. I lived on ramen and slept in the office more nights than I care to remember." "What kept you going?" Ethan's expression turned thoughtful. "I was a shy kid with dyslexia. Traditional classrooms were torture. But one teacher used computer games to help me learn. It changed everything for me. I wanted to create tools that could do the same for other kids." "That's beautiful," Emma said softly. "What about you? Why pediatric nursing?" It was Emma's turn to look reflective. "My younger brother had leukemia when we were kids. The nurses who cared for him became our heroes. They made an unbearable situation bearable." "Is he okay now, your brother?" Emma shook her head. "He passed away when I was 15, he was 12. That's when things fell apart with my mom. She couldn't handle the grief." Ethan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago," Emma said, "but it shaped me. I became a nurse because I wanted to be for other families what those nurses were for us." Their coffee date stretched into lunch, then a walk through the nearby botanical gardens. By the time Ethan drove Emma home, they both knew this was the beginning of something significant. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Ethan would call between meetings, sometimes just to hear her voice for 5 minutes. Emma would text him funny stories from the pediatric ward. They had dinner together 3 or 4 times a week, often including George, who watched their budding relationship with barely concealed delight. One evening, as they prepared dinner in Emma's tiny kitchen, Ethan asked, "Would you come to a fundraising gala with me next Saturday?" "For the Children's Education Foundation," Emma paused, knife hovering over the tomato she was slicing. "A gala, like formal dress important people? Unfortunately, yes. But I promise it's for a good cause. The foundation provides educational support for underprivileged kids." "I don't think I have anything appropriate to wear to something like that," Emma admitted. "You'd look beautiful in anything," Ethan said sincerely. "But if you'd like, we could go shopping this weekend." Emma hesitated, not wanting to admit that even with Ethan offering to buy her a dress, she felt intimidated by the prospect of entering his world, a world of wealth and influence so different from her own. Sensing her discomfort, Ethan set down the spatula he was holding. "Nina, what's wrong?" "Nothing, She took a deep breath. "Sometimes I wonder if you realize how different our lives are. You run a multi-million-dollar company. I work shifts at a hospital and bring casseroles to your grandfather. And which of those things do you think I value more?" Ethan asked quietly. Emma looked up, surprised by the emotion in his voice. "The day I met you," he continued, "you had just spent 12 hours caring for sick children, then taken the time to help my grandfather and drive him to the hospital. Your compassion, your generosity, those are worth more than any business success." Emma felt her reservations melting. "I'm being silly, aren't I?" "Not at all, but I hope you'll come to the gala. Not because I want to show you off, but because I'm proud to be with you and because the foundation's work would interest you." She reached for his hand. "Then I'd love to go." The night of the gala, Ethan picked up Emma wearing a classic black tuxedo that made her heart race. She wore a midnight blue gown they had chosen together, elegant but not extravagant, with a simplicity that made her feel confident rather than out of place. "You take my breath away," Ethan said when she opened the door. The event was held at the city's most prestigious hotel. As they entered the grand ballroom, Emma felt a momentary panic at the sight of so many important-looking people in formal attire, but Ethan kept his hand at the small of her back, a constant reassuring presence. "Ethan." "There you are," called a distinguished-looking woman in her 50s, approaching them with purpose. "The Johnsons are here and they're eager to discuss that matching donation. Cecilia, I'd like you to meet Nina Bellamy," Ethan said. "Nina, this is Cecilia Martinez, our foundation director and my right hand in all things philanthropic." "The hospital nurse," Cecilia's expression warmed immediately. "Ethan has told me so much about you. Your insights on our pediatric program have already been invaluable." "My insights?" Emma looked questioningly at Ethan. "The tablet initiative at your hospital," he explained. "Your feedback helped us improve the entire program." Throughout the evening, Emma was introduced to dozens of people, many of whom seemed genuinely interested in her work as a nurse. She found herself engaged in conversations about healthcare accessibility, educational needs for hospitalized children, and potential collaborations between HET and various medical facilities. During a quiet moment as they swayed together on the dance floor, Ethan murmured, "You're amazing, you know that. You've charmed every person here." "I'm just being myself," Emma replied. "Exactly," he said, looking at her with such tenderness that her heart stuttered. "That's what makes you extraordinary." As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Emma found that despite Ethan's success and busy schedule, he made her a priority. He would rearrange meetings to attend important events at her hospital. He remembered details about her patients and asked thoughtful questions about their progress. And he continued joining her and George for dinner several times a week, creating a sense of family that Emma had missed for years. The first challenge to their relationship came unexpectedly. A pharmaceutical company offered to buy HET for a staggering sum, but the deal would require Ethan to relocate to their headquarters in Chicago for at least 2 years. "It's an incredible opportunity," Emma said when he told her, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. "The resources they're offering could expand your educational platforms globally." They were sitting on the bench in the small courtyard behind their apartment building. It was early spring, and the first flowers were just beginning to bloom. "I know," Ethan said, his expression troubled. "But I've built my life here, Grandpa is here, and now you're here." Emma swallowed hard. "I would never want to hold you back." "That's not," Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Nina, you're not an obstacle to my success. You're part of what makes success meaningful." "But this opportunity will lead to others," he interrupted. "I didn't tell you about the offer because I'm considering it. I told you because I already declined it." "You did," Emma's eyes widened. "When?" "Yesterday. My board thinks I'm crazy, but they'll get over it." "Are you sure that was the right decision?" Ethan turned to face her fully. "Nina, do you remember our third date, when we went hiking and it started pouring rain halfway up the mountain?" She smiled at the memory. "We were soaked to the skin by the time we got back to the car. Most women would have been miserable. You were laughing, talking about how alive the rain made you feel." He took her hands in his. "That's when I knew I was falling in love with you." Emma's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had used that word. "I love you, Nina," Ethan continued, his voice steady and sure. "No business opportunity is worth sacrificing what we're building together." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "I love you too." Their kiss was sweet and promising, sealed with the understanding that they had chosen each other above all else. Summer arrived, bringing with it a heat wave and a health scare for George. What started as fatigue progressed to concerning symptoms that sent him back to the hospital. This time, the diagnosis was more serious: heart failure that would require ongoing treatment and significant lifestyle changes. "I can't live alone anymore, can I?" George asked after the doctor left his hospital room. "We'll figure it out, Grandpa," Ethan assured him, though worry lined his face. That night, as they sat on Emma's balcony watching the city lights, Ethan shared his concerns. He needs daily assistance, but he deserves his independence. A nursing home would break his spirit. What about a caregiver who comes to his apartment? Emma suggested. Maybe, Ethan sighed. I just hate the thought of him being alone most of the time. If my place wasn't a fourth-floor walk-up with no elevator. Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, what if we found a place together, something with enough space for all three of us? Ethan looked at her with surprise. You would do that? George has become family to me too, she said simply. And I love you. If we're talking about building a life together, why not start now? The search for a suitable home took time. They needed a place that was accessible for George but still felt like a home rather than a care facility. They found it in a charming craftsman house with a main-floor bedroom suite perfect for George and enough space upstairs for their own privacy. Moving day arrived in early autumn. Friends from the hospital helped Emma pack her small apartment, while Ethan's colleagues assisted with the heavier lifting. George supervised the careful transport of his beloved books, instructing the movers with professorial precision on their proper arrangement in the built-in shelves of his new bedroom. By evening, exhausted but happy, they sat on the porch of their new home. George had already retired to his room, claiming he needed to organize his domain, though Emma suspected he wanted to give them some time alone. I never thought I'd live in a house like this, Emma admitted, looking at the solid structure with its welcoming porch and mature trees. It feels like something from a dream. You know, Ethan said, taking her hand, there's one thing that would make it even more perfect. What's that? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's heart began to race as he opened it to reveal a vintage sapphire ring surrounded by tiny diamonds. This was my grandmother's, Ethan explained, his voice suddenly nervous. Grandpa gave it to me last week. He said she would have wanted you to have it. Ethan. He slid from the porch swing to one knee before her. Nina Bellamy, you walked into our lives with groceries and compassion, and everything has been brighter since. Will you marry me? Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, the porch light flickered on and they looked up to see George watching from the doorway, beaming with satisfaction. It's about time, the old man declared. Now does an engagement call for celebration? I believe I spotted a bottle of champagne in one of those kitchen boxes. They were married the following spring in the garden of their home. It was a small ceremony. Emma's mother came, their relationship tentatively mending. Ethan's parents attended separately but cordially. Hospital colleagues and business associates mingled easily among the cherry blossoms. George, resplendent in a new suit, walked Emma down the aisle. Margaret would have loved you, he whispered as they approached Ethan, who stood watching Emma with undisguised adoration. The vows they exchanged were simple but heartfelt, promises to support each other's dreams, to face challenges together, to build a family founded on love and respect. At the reception, George tapped his glass for attention. Though frailer than he had been a year ago, his voice was strong and clear. When Nina first helped me with my groceries, I thought I had found a kind neighbor. Little did I know I had found the missing piece of our family. He raised his glass. To Nina and Ethan, who remind an old man that love stories can begin in the most ordinary moments. 2 years later, Emma sat in the nursery of their home, gently rocking their newborn daughter. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them with wonder. She has your eyes, Emma said softly, and your determination. Did you see how she gripped the doctor's finger, strong-willed already? Emma smiled. Margaret Rose Harrison, do you think he'll like the name? He'll be overcome, Ethan said, sitting on the arm of the rocking chair. You know, when I came to visit Grandpa that day at the hospital, I never imagined how completely my life would change. Because of a broken box of groceries and an old man's cold, Emma marveled. Because of your heart, Ethan corrected, leaning down to kiss her forehead. The heart that made room for an elderly neighbor, then for his workaholic grandson, and now for our daughter. From downstairs came the sound of the front door opening, followed by George's voice calling up. Where's my great-granddaughter? I've brought books for her library. Emma and Ethan exchanged affectionate glances. "Some things never change," Emma said. "And I wouldn't want them to," Ethan replied, taking her hand as they rose to introduce little Margaret to the man who had, unknowingly, brought them together with nothing more than groceries and love.